in the first chaotic dawn of a full-scale invasion, as the sky itself seemed to fall upon Ukraine, a single, unbelievable story cut through the fog of war. It was the tale of an unseen defender, a phantom in the clouds who defied an entire army. The world would soon know him by a name that sparked both hope and mystery: the Ghost of Kyiv. But was this avenger a man of flesh and blood, a clever fiction, or something else entirely? As February 24, 2022 unfolded in fire and fury, a new kind of warfare erupted online. Social media feeds flooded with claims of an impossible feat: a Ukrainian pilot, they said, flying a lone MiG-29, was carving a path of destruction through the Russian Air Force. 2 kills became 4, then 6, all in a single, relentless day. A desperate world, watching a nation under siege, craved a hero. And in this digital age, one was delivered overnight. The legend described a master pilot pushing an aging Fulcrum jet beyond its limits, a David against a modern Goliath. But as the story spread, a critical eye turned to the evidence. The very clips used to prove the ghost's existence began to unravel. Aviation experts and digital forensics quickly identified a shocking truth. The dramatic dogfights, the fiery explosions, they weren't combat footage. They were meticulously crafted scenes from a video game. So, did this mean the entire legend was a complete fabrication? The answer is more complex than a simple yes or no. The narrative was, in part, a weapon forged not of steel, but of spirit. In those terrifying initial hours, Ukraine's morale was a strategic resource as vital as any anti-tank missile. The Ghost was a deliberate symbol, a psychological tool to unite a people and show the world their defiance. He was hope, given wings and a call sign. This wasn't merely a lie, it was a message, a statement that the sky was contested, and the spirit of resistance was alive. Yet, to say the Ghost wasn't real misses a profound point. The myth was grounded in a powerful collective reality. Official sources later clarified that the Ghost of Kyiv was not one man, but the embodiment of the 40th Tactical Aviation Brigade. These were the real pilots, exhausted, outnumbered, flying mission after mission from battered airfields. They slept in their gear, lost comrades, and still strapped into their cockpits. As one pilot later reflected, the Ghost lived in all of them. But then, a specific name entered the story, threatening to pin the legend to a single, tragic fate. That name was Major Stepan Terabolka, a real MiG-29 pilot, a father, a husband, a hero who fell in battle over Kyiv for a brief moment. International media anointed him as the Ghost, the ace with 10 kills. But the government soon set the record straight. Terabolka was a brave pilot, but he was not the mythical ace. His story, however, is no less heroic for it. He was one of many. So why did this specific myth resonate across the globe? In the face of overwhelming force and terrifying uncertainty, the human psyche seeks an anchor. The Ghost was that anchor. He represented the defiant underdog, the idea that one person's courage could tilt the scales. He was a necessary spark in overwhelming darkness. A legend can be the oxygen a nation breathes. Modern aerial combat, however, is rarely the cinematic duel we imagine. It is a high-tech long-range game of radar and missiles. Engagements happen over vast distances, often without pilots ever seeing their opponent. The margin for error is zero. So, was it even possible for one pilot to achieve 6 kills in a day? The consensus is that it was statistically improbable, but in the chaos of those first days, not entirely impossible. Throughout history, myths have been potent weapons of war. They shape perception and bolster resolve. From the White Death of Finland to the Red Baron of Germany, legends often outpace the facts of the individuals they're based on. Deception, like the Allied Ghost Army of World War II, has always been a part of conflict. Wars are won with soldiers and strategy, but also with the stories we tell about them. So, who truly defended the skies over the capital? It was a brotherhood of aviators. Dozens of pilots from multiple squadrons, supported by dedicated ground crews, formed an invisible shield. They flew not for glory, but for their homes. Not all of them landed safely, but each one who took off, knowing the risks, carried the spirit of the legend with them. Today, the Ghost of Kyiv endures. You can find him in murals on city walls, in songs, and on the patches worn by soldiers. The myth persists not because of a verified kill count, but because it captures a fundamental truth, a nation's unbreakable will to fight for its freedom. So, we return to the central question. Was the Ghost of Kyiv real? There was never just one man in that cockpit. There were many ghosts: the pilot staring down a formation of enemy aircraft, the mechanic repairing a fuel line by flashlight, the family praying for a safe return. The Ghost was never a singular person. It was, and remains, the defiant soul of a people. And in the end, a story can sometimes hold more power than any single fact. If you were captivated by this look at modern myth-making, then you need to understand the real, documented dogfight where a Ukrainian pilot in a MiG-29 faced off against a far more advanced Russian Su-35. Subscribe to Winds of Thought and let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like this video, it truly helps our channel. Winds of Thought, bring you more content like this. The story of the ghost of Kyiv represents a fascinating phenomenon in modern conflict, the intersection of digital culture, psychological warfare, and the timeless human need for heroes. In an age where information travels at the speed of light, legends can be born, spread, and solidified in the global consciousness within hours rather than years. This rapid myth-making process represents a new frontier in how narratives shape conflicts and influence public perception on a global scale. What's particularly compelling about this case is how the legend served multiple purposes simultaneously. For the Ukrainian people facing an existential threat, it provided a crucial psychological bolster, something to believe in during their darkest hours. For the international community watching with horror, it created a focal point for support and sympathy, humanizing a complex geopolitical conflict through the lens of a single relatable hero figure. And for the Russian forces, it introduced an element of psychological uncertainty, the fear that they might be facing a seemingly supernatural adversary who could appear anywhere and strike with impunity. The digital forensics that eventually uncovered the video game origins of many ghost clips speaks to another modern reality: our collective vulnerability to misinformation, even when it serves a noble cause. This raises profound questions about how we verify information in the digital age, and where we draw the line between inspirational storytelling and deliberate deception. Yet the persistence of the legend even after these revelations were widely publicized demonstrates that some stories fulfill needs that transcend factual accuracy. The technological aspect of this story cannot be overlooked. The MiG-29 Fulcrum, while a capable aircraft, was significantly outclassed by many of the Russian fighters it would theoretically have faced. This technological disparity makes the legend even more powerful. It represents the triumph of skill and courage over raw technical superiority. It's the 21st century version of the ancient story of the clever underdog defeating a powerful but clumsy giant. Military historians will likely study the ghost of Kyiv phenomenon for decades to come as a prime example of 21st century information operations. Unlike traditional propaganda, which was typically distributed through official channels, this legend spread organically through social media, amplified by both official sources and ordinary citizens around the world. This decentralized, crowdsourced aspect makes it particularly resilient and adaptable. You can't counter a narrative that has no single source and that people want to believe. The legend also reflects the changing nature of warfare itself. In an era where conflicts are fought as much in the digital realm as on physical battlefields, controlling the narrative has become increasingly important. The Ghost of Kyiv represents a masterful understanding of this new reality, a story weaponized, not just to boost morale but to shape global public opinion and potentially influence the strategic calculations of an adversary. There's also a philosophical dimension to this story that's worth exploring. The ghost represents what psychologists might call a social fact, something that becomes real because people believe it's real and act accordingly. The courage that Ukrainian pilots drew from this legend, the fear it potentially instilled in their adversaries, the international support it helped galvanize, these were all very real consequences of a story that may not have been strictly factual in its particulars. The comparison to historical military legends is instructive. Figures like the Red Baron or Simo Higi were based on real individuals with verified accomplishments. Yet their legends quickly grew beyond their actual deeds. The Ghost of Kyiv represents something new, a legend that was collective and symbolic from its inception. Rather than being attached to a specific individual whose accomplishments were later exaggerated, this represents an evolution in how military myths are created and deployed. The ethical questions surrounding the legend are complex. Was it justified to potentially mislead people during a time of national emergency? Does the cause of defending national sovereignty justify the creation of potentially misleading narratives? These are questions without easy answers, and they speak to the moral complexities of modern conflict where information itself has become a battlefield. The legacy of the Ghost of Kyiv will likely extend far beyond the current conflict. We've already seen the template repeated in other contexts, the anonymous hero standing against overwhelming odds, their identity mysterious, their deeds amplified through digital networks. This archetype has proven powerfully effective in capturing the public imagination and may well become a standard feature of how conflicts are narrated in the digital age. From a cultural perspective, the ghost has taken on a life of his own. The murals, the songs, the artwork, these manifestations show how a military legend can evolve into a broader cultural symbol. He has become part of Ukraine's national narrative, a modern addition to the pantheon of heroes that define the country's identity and its determination to remain free and independent. The scientific community has also taken interest in the phenomenon, studying how and why such legends spread so rapidly in digital environments. Research into the cognitive psychology behind our receptiveness to such stories, the network dynamics that enable their viral spread, and the neurological basis for our attraction to heroic narratives may help us better understand not just this specific case, but the broader mechanisms of information diffusion in the internet age. For the pilots who actually flew those dangerous missions, the legend created a complicated reality. While it undoubtedly boosted morale, it also created expectations and pressures. How does it feel to be compared to a near-mythical figure when you're simply doing your job under unimaginable stress? The human dimension of this story, the real people behind the legend, remains one of its most poignant aspects. The ghost story also highlights the changing role of air power in modern warfare. Once seen as the decisive factor in conventional conflicts, air superiority has proven more elusive in Ukraine than many experts predicted. The legend of a single pilot defying overwhelming odds reflects this new reality that technological advantage alone doesn't guarantee victory, and that human factors like training, morale, and ingenuity remain crucially important. As we look to the future, the ghost of Kyiv raises important questions about how we'll remember this conflict. Will the legend be preserved as a meaningful symbol of national resistance, or will it be dismissed as wartime propaganda? How will historians balance the factual record with the powerful symbolic role this story played? The answers may tell us much about how societies process and memorialize traumatic events. The international response to the legend is itself revealing. The immediate embrace of the story by global audiences suggests a universal hunger for narratives of courage and defiance in the face of injustice. This transnational appeal demonstrates how certain stories can transcend cultural and political boundaries to become shared global myths that speak to fundamental human values. From a strategic perspective, the ghost phenomenon represents a fascinating case study in asymmetric warfare. Lacking the resources of their adversary, Ukrainian forces have consistently leveraged creativity and innovation to level the playing field. The strategic use of narrative, as exemplified by the ghost legend, can be seen as part of this broader pattern of turning limitations into advantages through cleverness and determination. The psychological impact of such legends is difficult to measure but impossible to ignore. The boost to morale, the strengthening of national unity, the international sympathy generated these intangible factors can have very tangible effects on the outcome of a conflict. The ghost of Kyiv reminds us that wars are won not just with weapons but with will, and that stories can be powerful weapons in the battle for hearts and minds. As the conflict continues to evolve, the legend of the ghost of Kyiv continues to adapt. New sightings are reported, new stories emerge, and the myth continues to serve its purpose: to inspire, to unite, and to remind both Ukrainians and the world that the spirit of resistance remains unbroken. This adaptability demonstrates the enduring power of the narrative and its continued relevance to the ongoing struggle. In the final analysis, the ghost of Kyiv represents something fundamental about the human condition: our need to find meaning and hope in moments of crisis, our capacity for courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and our eternal fascination with the idea that one person can make a difference, whether as a historical fact, a psychological phenomenon, or a cultural symbol. The ghost has secured its place not just in the history of this conflict, but in the broader story of human resilience and the enduring power of hope.